What if the biggest barrier to your leadership success is the way you're communicating right now? What if you could unlock the keys to exponential growth, foster unshakable team alignment, and drive innovation, all while creating a leadership legacy that outlasts you? Tissa Richards, a repeat software founder and CEO, award-winning author, and globally renowned leadership expert. From delivering electrifying keynotes at Fortune 500 companies,
we'll ask people to do things and we won't give them the why. It doesn't take long to say, I've asked you to do this, or I've given you this directive. Here's why. Suddenly the clarity is there, the purpose is there, the context is there. You're going to see engagement, productivity, efficiency skyrocket. Don't expect your listener to parse out all this stuff. The job is not on the listener's part, it's on the communicator's part.
If you're ready to break barriers, ignite innovation, and truly lead, this masterclass is your blueprint. What if you could unlock the keys to exponential growth, foster unshakable team alignment, and drive innovation, all while creating a leadership legacy that outlasts you? In this episode, I sit down with Tissa Richards, a repeat software founder and CEO, award-winning author, and globally renowned leadership expert. From delivering electrifying keynotes at Fortune 500 companies to guiding hundreds of executives onto public and private boards, Tissa has mastered the art of transforming purpose into profit. Her book, No Permission Needed, is not just an Amazon bestseller, it's a roadmap for breaking barriers, building influence, and redefining leadership. Today, she'll share how she connects strategy to execution, helping companies shatter ceilings in revenue, innovation, and productivity. So stay tuned as we uncover Tissa's insights on aligning leaders and teams for success, her journey as a Silicon Valley pioneer, and her no-holds-barred advice for taking your career and your organization to the next level. It's not just an interview, it's a masterclass in leadership that you can't afford to miss. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. So good to be here, Mike.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And I hope the listeners stick through this whole interview. You got some great things to tell us. So first, let's start off with a little discussion about leadership. So you emphasize the importance of connecting strategy to execution. Kind of seems like a no-brainer, but can you share a practical example of how leaders can align those two elements effectively?
Yeah, it does seem like a no-brainer, right? But I think a lot of times we'll ask people to do things and we won't give them the why or the context behind it. And I think a lot of times we just forget. We're busy, we're doing so much, and we forget that psychologically understanding the why makes it so much easier for people to actually just get stuff done. I almost just used a 4-letter word, but just to get things done, right? And so, you have the strategy in your head. You told people what we're trying to accomplish, the outcome. And unless you really give people the clear why and the context, so much gets lost in the translation between the two. And it doesn't take long to say, I've asked you to do this, or I've given you this directive. Here's why. That's all it takes. And suddenly the clarity is there, the purpose is there, the context is there. You're going to see engagement, productivity, efficiency skyrocket. And it doesn't take that long, but so many times we miss that critical step.
Definitely. I mean, it's interesting. I was actually talking to another coach and he was confused by why his client pushed back on something that he gave him. And I asked him, did you explain why it should be that way? And he said, no, I didn't. I didn't think I needed to. Well, people want to know the why. I mean, sometimes it makes it easier to accept change when you understand the why. So, leadership, it involves creating a sense of purpose within a team. So how do you advise leaders to uncover and communicate the why behind their work?
Yeah, I think that, the uncovering is a lot of the strategy development. What are you trying to accomplish? So you've got your KPIs. Hopefully that is a key part of why you're there and why you're working. The communication piece, I think you just hit on something really key, Mike, right? Because I feel like that's where so many individual leaders and teams fall down. People think they're communicating something, they're not. So I do this exercise sometimes where I'll say, I'll go to a meeting, I'll listen, and I'll ask the person, so the leader or whoever, what did you think you say? What did you think you said? Excuse me. And what do you think the most important thing people should take away? And then you turn to the people in the meeting or the audience and you say, what did you hear? And what was the most important? And there's almost always a gap, and people are surprised And you realize it's because we're not naturally great communicators. We think we are, but we're not. We don't practice it. It's a skill. It's not an innate thing that most people have.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because it's something I've actually learned in my personal life. When we moved to this house, for instance, we have a very open floor plan. But if my wife is in the living room and I walk into the kitchen, numerous times when we first moved here, I'd ask her a question and I'd get the weirdest response. And then finally it dawned on me, I don't think she's hearing exactly what I'm saying. So I finally started asking her, what did you hear me ask?
Yeah.
And it was always something different. And so then you start to learn, like, well, if you get the weird response from people, they probably didn't hear the message that you were presenting. So, when people are trying to align their teams towards a common goal, what are some of the big mistakes that they're making?
So I think that first one is thinking you have communicated it. So I don't know. I don't know if some of us have been in therapy, like couples therapy or whatever, but what is the thing they have you do? It's that active listening, right? So you literally say, okay, what I heard you say was X. And you don't do it in a way that alienates people, but you got to make sure that everybody actually heard what you thought you said. So, and again, this stuff doesn't have to take a lot of time or take a lot of cycles or resources, but that quick check-in and alignment is going to save a lot of time because you think you've given everybody the context, but they heard something else. To your point, you ask your wife a question, she answers something else. So just taking that time to say, can I just hear a playback of what we all heard, what we're all going to do really fast? Now we're going to save a lot of cycles because people are not going to all be paddling off in different directions. And now you come back and you're like, where is everybody? So that's just one technique that takes literally seconds and can save you hours or weeks, just as an example.
Yeah, I mean, a feedback loop like that is really important because, like you say, you think you've communicated a message. Let's find out what the person heard.
Yeah.
And there's no harm in taking like 3 seconds to say, hey, what can you kind of tell me what I just said to you? Like, what did you just hear? And like you said, in a non-condescending manner,
Yeah.
it saves so much time. And you're right. Like, communication is something, like, this is my 109th episode of this show. And I've learned to listen and actively listen because I can't interview people if I'm not paying attention to what they're saying and really paying attention. Like, I always tell people, and people get confused by this, but they also sometimes don't agree with me. I think there's listening and I think there's hearing. And I think a lot of people hear, they're hearing the noise and whatnot, but they're not really listening. To me, listening is understanding the message being communicated to you and in a way that you could respond to it if you were asked questions. Whereas hearing is just blah 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 blah, like kind of like, remember the Charlie Brown cartoons where they're in the school and the teachers rah, rah, rah,
I know
rah.
yeah.
Same thing, like it's just exactly like that. So
Mike, I think you're really right too, because one of the things that I always kind of encourage or I actually work with teams on is understanding too how we absorb and receive information. And we are just really overloaded, right? Just look at what social media has done for us. We're so used to getting shorter clips of information. I read, and I don't remember the number, but more and more people are watching television with closed captioning on because there's so much stuff that it's like another way to make sure you're actually receiving the dialogue. And so I always say to people, like, practice cognitive kindness. So we like to, as humans, think, if I throw information over the fence at you, I've done my job. But you actually have only just begun your job. You have to prepare, package up the information in the way that's the most digestible for the listener. The job is not on the listener's part, it's on the communicator's part. So just knowing some basic facts, like we receive, I think it's 100 million bits of information per second, but the executive center of your brain can only process 40. So whose job is it? Is it the listeners or is it the communicators? I would argue it's the communicators to just try and give them only the 40, right? And this is not a literal, but it's to show the asymmetry. Try and get to the point and just give them the point. Don't expect your listener to parse out all this stuff and then walk away, because what are they going to do? They're just going to go, wow, that was a lot. I didn't listen. I didn't even hear. And now you're not going to be aligned.
Yeah, no, that's an important aspect too, because there are people who talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and the point's buried in there somewhere. but people tune out, or they listen to everything, they hear everything, but it's the point is lost in all the other words. I mean, it's like a politician giving a speech and they keep repeating the same phrase over and over again. And you kind of, after a while, you start to say, what does that have to do with what you're talking about? Like, it makes no sense. That's poor communication. So like, I feel that, you talk about, in my notes, I found out that you help organizations drive revenue, innovation, and productivity. I think those are three. Obviously, revenue is huge, but innovation and productivity are key areas that help drive revenue. So what's the first step for a leader that wants to ignite those outcomes within their company?
Yes, I think it's resilience. And I think that's resilience at an individual level, a team level, and a company level. Because I think that you can't get to those goals if everyone is burned out, if everyone is just sort of dropping the ball on engagement and productivity. So that's something that I've really been focused on the most recently. A lot of research on it, really interviewing tons and tons of leaders globally and from all different industries to find out how, first of all, why are we sort of seeing this dip in resilience, and how can we increase it? But I think when you have people who are not burned out, who feel resilient, and then therefore they're more engaged, they're happier, they're just able to be there and be productive, all those other things will not suffer, if that makes sense.
So what does resilience look like at the company level?
At the company level, if you think about it, we hear about this, right? Business continuity, business resilience. So I think it's the ability to be adaptable, look around the corner, be competitive, be innovative. It's the ability to stay really relevant, but that has to be supported by the people. So if the people are really burned out, the people are not functioning, there's a lot of friction, I don't think they're able to support that. And that really needs to be supported, I think, by the leaders.
Yeah, I mean, and as we were discussing earlier, a lot of companies downsized, and they're trying to get more out of their people, but with less people. So how can a leader foster a culture of innovation in an environment like that?
It's really hard. And I mean, some of the things that I'm seeing is that it's maybe not possible. I mean, I know you talk to a lot of people from technology leadership roles, and we are asking people to do more with less. And there's only so long you can do that before, I mean, I love the boiling frog analogy. Eventually you realize, wow, it's hot in here, right? And I think that this is where suddenly we're seeing so much burnout. And so I think a really good leader is also one who says, I don't think that this is actually sustainable. So you can only ask so much from your team. If it's no longer possible, you've got to resource the team. And that's when you also have to be able to manage up and go to the board, go to the CEO and say, this is not sustainable. And we've done this for so long. We've just asked teams to give the same amount of output with fewer and fewer people. And it's not going to work.
Yeah, I know it creates undue pressure that ends up driving people away from the job. I mean, like one of the things I teach my tech executives, because they're very I don't know, they're driven by like, how many hours did someone work? How many hours did someone work? And then I say to them, why not switch to an outcome-based form of leadership where you've subscribed to the idea of doing sprints in agile development. So you do like a 3-week sprint. So you're going to start on day one, and there's going to be 21 days of development. If you've done your job correctly, that sprint contains all the key things that need to get done now. If they get it done in 18 days, what's the harm in taking a day off so that they're ready for the next sprint? You're letting them recharge. And the looks I get, like, do you know what my CEO would say? Well, yeah, it's kind of your job, though, to make sure your team is taken care of. And you have to watch for that burnout. It's really, to me, it's a scourge that, we need to get rid of in businesses. So let's talk about your book, No Permissions Needed. It's all about breaking barriers. What's the biggest leadership barrier that you had to overcome, and how did you do it?
Yeah, so the book is really about being able to talk about your value and your values and be able to communicate them in a very clear and declarative way. And I think that overcoming, I had to wind down my last software company in less than ideal circumstances and figure out who am I now and what am I going to do? And I see a huge barrier that people have is not being able to talk about themselves in a very clear way. And this is not dissimilar to what we talked about before, where you can say to somebody, here's what I need you to go do, but the why is very buried. And so if you ask, you interview, you think you said 110 people, right? And if you say, tell me about yourself, the answer is usually really hard to discern. And you're sort of thinking, I heard what you do, I heard how you do it. Who do you do it for? What outcomes does it create? And when you can get really clear on that, whether it's for yourself, your team, the company, it's a breath of fresh air, and it's a cognitive kindness. So it's really teaching people how to do that and how to get confident about it. So I also think it increases resilience. If you are comfortable, here's the value I bring, here's the values I operate on, my non-negotiables, it makes everything easier, because if it's a low stakes situation, that's great. When the stakes get higher, you already know them. They're already in hand, right? So that was really the purpose of the book.
Yeah, no, you've said twice now, cognitive kindness, and I actually wrote it down in my notes because I love that phrase. It's it's something that like when people are in that situation where they know their own abilities and they know their own capabilities, and they can like own that and not let anything else shake them, they go far. I mean, they can break through walls. I mean, it's crazy. It's when they lack the confidence, and it kind of makes sense. It makes them less resilient. They can't survive the tough times because they're letting people push them in different directions rather than being like, look, I know my job. I'm good at it. And here's where we have to go with this. And being confident enough to stand up to leadership and say that. I mean, like I'm all about decentralized leadership. I don't want people micromanaging. I don't want them helicoptering. I want them to give people a role, define what the role is, tell them what decisions they're allowed to make and what requires approval and what does not, and then let them do their job. I think it's the only way to work less hours as a leader and also build future leaders. It's one thing we don't teach in businesses is how to lead. We just promote somebody to the manager position and then go do it. And they
And
have no clue what they're doing.
Mike, you and I are both coaches, and I mean, at least for me, I coach at the C level and sort of one below. And most of the time, companies don't bring in any sort of professional development until a very high level. And so there's a really big, the future leaders that aren't getting a lot of instruction or guidance, which is, I think, really a shame. But I also think, you just said something really interesting, which is, if you can contextualize why you're doing something, even or why you're not. So think about all the overworked people, right? And I've had someone come to me and say, well, I was just asked to do X and it's not in my remit. It's not even in my functional area, but how can I say no? Well, if you were able to say, this is the value I bring to this organization, I bring the greatest value when I'm doing this, not when I'm doing what you've just asked me to do. So it's not saying no, but it's saying, I'm going to focus on this because this is the value. This doesn't add value. And so you're saying no and putting it in context. It's confidence building, but it's giving it the very specificity of why this doesn't make sense to add this to your team, to add this to your load. But you have to know that. You have to know what value you bring first, and you have to have the ability to articulate it and communicate it, and then have that self-advocacy to say it. And to your point, yeah, this is how you're not going to be working those extra 10, 15, 20 hours a week for your team or for you.
It's interesting because a lot of people today, they all hear about, you have to niche down, you have to make sure that you have a real sharp focus. But then when it comes to like actually operating their department within their business, they just keep taking on more and taking on more and taking on more. And then you have to ask themselves, is this what my department was meant to handle? Am I supposed to be handling this? And to your point earlier about like resilience within a business, I think that's where it shows is the leader, like the CEO, needs to step in and say, you know what, we need to take that tech department now. We need to cut off a part of it and create a new smaller department that handles just this issue. And that way you're not taking the focus away that was put there originally for that department. And I think it's important. And people don't, we all go back and we set goals every year people have their, New Year's resolutions, which I hate. And yet they don't take the time to reevaluate their business situation. And, you started with 3 departments. Do you need those same 3 departments? Do you need to get rid of one? Do you need to add a couple? What do you have to do? But you have to continually look at that, because businesses are a living, breathing entity. They keep growing, and the needs of the business change, and you have to change with it. So what's in your workshops and keynotes, what's the most impactful piece of advice that you share about becoming an influential leader, in your opinion? What's the most impactful?
I think there's probably 2. And
Okay.
the first is that if you are not thriving, your team and your company are not thriving. So, resilience has to start with you. And it's really easy to just wear yourself down and think, it's okay, I'll catch up later. But you have to set that example of resilience. And the second is communication. Powerful communicators are seen as powerful leaders. So you are doing everybody a favor by investing in your communication skills. It reduces friction, and it just increases how you can find signal and noise and then communicate signal and noise. So I think if you can invest in 2 things as a leader, it's think about resilience in a different way and think about communicating with so much clarity.
Well, you talking about communication, it's not a business topic, but it makes me think of the election we just went through, and people asking, why did the person who everyone thought was going to win not win? And when you really break it down, she didn't tell us what she was about. She couldn't communicate the message, which is strange to me. When you do something all your life and then suddenly you can't communicate what you're about, it's strange to me. It's almost like she froze up on the big stage, right? Like here you are, here's your big speaking engagement. You get out there, you hold the microphone, you're like, what do I say now?
And there's a lot of professional communications people that are behind all those campaigns, right? But as a leader, you don't need a whole speechwriter, and you just
Right.
It just takes a little bit of thought to think about, what am I saying? How am I saying it? So there's the content, then there's the delivery, and I just think investing in that and investing in your team learning how to do that is going to move the needle in a really big way.
So if leadership were a recipe, like for making a
this is one of your questions, Mike.
Yeah.
Here we go.
What would be the most surprising ingredient in your version, and why?
Goodness, I like this question. What would be the most surprising ingredient? I think humility. So, how sometimes they say put a little bit of it's unexpected, like salt or something, and I'm not a cook. If I love you, I do not cook for you. That's, people know that about me. But I've sometimes read where they're like, oh, if something doesn't taste right, it's not the ingredient you expect, right? So I literally teach people about confidence and swagger and things like that, which is great. But it's also really important to have that humility and own the things that you don't do well. I don't do math. I actually have a disability, a learning disability when it comes to numbers. And I will just say that out loud, and it doesn't diminish who I am as a leader. So just to literally out loud say, I'm remarkable at these things. These are the places I fall over. This is why I need you and you and you. I think having humility, not be self-deprecating where it makes people uncomfortable, but bring the people in so that they know what you're good at and what you're not good at, and don't apologize for it. But I think it's a bit of an unexpected thing with some leaders to have confidence and humility in some sort of ratio, and it just makes you very real.
And a lot of people think that you can't have those 2 things together, and you obviously can.
Yeah.
So you've guided people towards board positions. What's the most surprising question a board is asked during the selection process?
Well, I think you would be great on a board selection committee because of the questions you ask. So we've had questions like, if you were a superhero, what would you be? If you were a kitchen, what's an appliance? I don't even know that because I don't cook. If you were a vegetable. And actually what I encourage people to do in that case is you don't have to answer the question you're asked. You can pivot and answer the question, not in a slimy way, but answer the question that you think they're trying to get to, right? So there are some strange ones, but what's the question we get asked all the time? Tell me about yourself. That's the question that starts 120% of all conversations, right?
That's interesting because I actually like today I'm interviewing people for my executive assistant position, and that's one of the last questions I'll ask, not the first one, because I kind of want to see who they are first and then
Mm-hmm.
compare it to what they think who they think they are. Kind of that feedback loop that we were talking about. Let them answer a bunch of questions and then ask them, okay, tell me about yourself. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Well, I've
Yeah.
already kind of figured that out through the interview. Now let's see what you think.
Mm-hmm.
It's always an interesting thing. One of the things we've had a habit of doing for like 10 years in our companies is when we hire a new person, because most of our people are remote, we'll ask them, how do you like to be communicated with? Email, text, Slack? What's your preferred form of
Yeah.
communication? And I find that to be something lacking with other people because I, for one, don't like getting communicated with by email. It's to me, it's sort of like a disconnected method of communication. If you've got something important to say to me, you probably should text me or
Mm-hmm.
call me. Those are the two ways to handle it because it gets my attention. My email is going to get my attention twice a day, once in the morning, once at the end of the day. Well, what if you needed me to do something at 2 in the afternoon? It's not going to happen. And I let my clients know that right up front. Like, if you really want an answer, send me a text. So I think it's interesting, like just how everyone's different in how they want to communicate, and no one asks the question.
And and again, right, isn't this about it? That's a cognitive kindness. So I do workshops where we literally create README documents. And I know that your tech listeners will love this. It's a README about you. And when you bring on new people or you're creating a new team, you create READMEs. So people, it's this exact thing. And it's not just the how, but it's the why. So I what is the question that makes people's heart stops usually? It's somebody higher than you in the organization. Can we talk for a minute? And people go, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So for some people, they like a context. Can we talk for a minute about do, right? And so, but for some people, they don't need that second bit of information. They just want to know, can we talk? Yes. So it's for whatever level of detail, how do you want to communicate? Why, how? People, when I was running my software companies, everybody knew, please don't schedule calls for me before 9 or 10 o'clock. I'm not a morning person. I'm bitchy. I'm grumpy. My brain doesn't work. There's a very short period during the day where I'm delightful. And then that's it. Not morning, not night. But we all sort of we knew how to contact each other just like you did. And why can't teams take 1 or 2 hours and do this with each other? Wouldn't it reduce friction and just make things faster to get to the outcome? It doesn't take long and it opens up so much about, hey, why? That's interesting. Like you get to know people and you just get to the outcome so fast.
One of the key things that I used to do for team building when I led larger teams, we were required in the company I worked with, we had a company called Management Action Planning. They were consultants and they'd meet with the executive team weekly. And then we were expected monthly to have a meeting with our teams, which had a very strict structure. But one of the things that I added to it was what's working and what's not working. And we would start with the what's working and just have like a giant post-it up on the wall and you just write what's working and just throw your ideas out there. And it kind of shows people how successful they've been since the last meeting. These are all the things that are working. Then we do the what's not working. And it'd be things like the spam filter's not working on the email system and we need to fix that. Or people are complaining that calls are getting dropped when customers are calling in. Well, what I did that was kind of counterintuitive is let's use the phone system issue. Well, probably want to take the guy who's the network engineer that handles the phone system and make him fix it. But what I would do is I would take the help desk technician and I'd say, you're the point person on this task. And you're going to pull, obviously the email guy or the phone guy is going to be involved with you. He's going to be one of your resources, but you have to decide what resources you need and to get this problem fixed. And you have to come up with a plan to get the problem fixed. What it ended up doing was it got the phone guy to understand what the help desk person was all about and vice versa. And what was a great side effect in the end, stronger team. They had unity because They understood each other. No more was it like, hey, I sent John an email an hour ago and he hasn't responded. They understand why he can't respond because they worked with him on a job. But it also exposed them to other aspects of our business that they might not never have seen. So here, you mentioned your workshops, and if you could turn one of your workshop exercises into a viral TikTok challenge, what would it be?
I think it would be to answer the question or complete this sentence, I'm known for, but make sure it's not something like my superpower is. It has to be an outcome. I'm known for creating these outcomes for these stakeholders. And do not include the how you do it or the what you do to get there. And it is really hard. But when you can do that, you can imprint yourself on people's brains and their neurons. And they'll be in a conversation a week or two from now, and someone will say something and it will tickle their neurons and they'll go, wait, you need to meet Mike. And it is so effective because I can tell you this, no one has ever said to me, who's the most empathetic person that you know? Who's the person whose superpower is whatever, inspiring people? What people come to people with is the problems. Who's the person that can scale a company because we have to go into the Mideast tomorrow and blah, blah, blah. That's the what I'm known for piece. How you do it is so secondary, but we always lead with the how we do things and the what we do. So that is my viral TikTok. I'm known for, and it's a powerful way to start a sentence.
I love that. I think, like one of the things that my staff always learns is when there's a problem, I just want the problem fixed. I don't really care why the problem happened. If we need to determine why the problem happened, we'll do that afterwards. That's postmortem stuff. That's not getting into it because we're wasting time. There's a problem. Let's fix the problem. And then we'll determine why there was a problem later. And because what I've found is most times people just make excuses and they don't even realize they're making excuses. To them, those are the reasons for the problem, but they're not. They're just excuses. And there's something deeper there. We can figure that out later. We don't need to talk about that as we're fixing the problem. That always frustrates me. And people have learned, don't waste his time with the why. He doesn't care about the why right now. He cares about let's solve the problem. So this has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed spending time with you. You've got some great insights and just some solid viewpoints on things. And I think we agree on most everything that you've said. How can the listeners connect with you?
Yeah, so it's really easy. Either find me on LinkedIn or my website, which is tissarichards.com. And from there you can book it's been a long day. You can book workshops or keynotes, and the information about the previous book is there and the upcoming book, which is about rethinking resilience. So that's the keynote I'm traveling and giving right now.
Awesome. That's exciting. That's really exciting. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for taking time to be here. I know it's not easy to, drop other things and sit here for a while and speak with me, but I really appreciate the time. I really do.
I really enjoyed it. I appreciate the opportunity. It was so good to meet you, Mike.
Same, likewise. Well, everybody, thanks for listening to another episode of Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. We release new episodes every Wednesday, 8 a.m. Pacific time on YouTube and LinkedIn at the same time. Please tune in, subscribe if you have not already, and watch the video that's on screen now. YouTube thinks you're going to like it.